Imagine this. A creature so feared that entire fleets turned to vapor at its approach. A predator so merciless that even the galaxy's elder races whisper its name in dread. And yet, it bows its head for one man. That's the story you're about to hear. But before we step into the council chamber where everything changed, make sure you hit that like button, drop a comment on who you think could tame such a beast, and subscribe for more stories that prove why humanity should never be underestimated. Now let's begin. The chamber was vast, a cathedral carved from light and stone, its walls rising in a perfect spiral of crystalline panels that shimmered with shifting holograms. Each panel displayed the same images: warfleets burning in silence, dreadnoughts split like driftwood, colonies swallowed whole. Every scene bore the mark of one being, the apex predator the galaxy had named Extinction Incarnate. For decades, it had ignored treaties, shrugged off weapons, and laughed at containment. Today at last the council claimed it had caught it. Representatives of 200 worlds gathered in tiers around the pit at the chamber's center. Voices buzzed like insects, fearful, angry, and desperate. The predator had been trapped in a gravity cage that drank the light around it. Through the shimmering veil of the prison, the outline was visible. A beast coiled like a living mountain, limbs folded, head lowered but not in submission. Its eyes glowed faintly, watching, calculating, waiting. The assembled races knew what it meant to wait. The predator had destroyed fleets not because it rushed to slaughter but because it chose its moment with chilling patience. That patience now radiated in silence. No words had moved it, no command had stirred it. At the head of the chamber, a figure leaned forward, his carapace gleaming with authority. High Chancellor Rythar of the Valith, a species who claimed they had mapped the stars before humanity had discovered fire. His voice carried like a blade. It listens to no one. It yields to no banner. It has never acknowledged the authority of this council. We have given it ultimatums and it does not answer. We have demanded submission and it mocks us with stillness. It has no master. Murmurs echoed, rising into a storm of debate. And then another voice, sharp with derision, cut through. Perhaps we should let the humans try. They have a history with dangerous pets. The laughter that followed was acid. The humans, upstarts, barely 2 centuries in the stars, still clinging to their fragile colonies, still mocked for their reckless courage. And yet, one of them had been invited. Not out of respect but out of scorn. Captain Elias Varen stood at the edge of the chamber, a lean figure wrapped in the dark navy of Earth's fledgling fleet. His hair was cropped short, his stance straight, but his eyes, storm-gray, steady, betrayed none of the unease that prickled through the chamber around him. He knew what they expected: for him to step forward, be torn apart, and serve as one more reason to belittle his species. He didn't mind. Humans were used to being underestimated. The council's laughter died as Elias moved. His boots rang lightly on the crystalline floor as he descended toward the pit. Each step fell into silence. Even the predator's gaze shifted, its void-black eyes following him with a slow, measured turn. Captain Elias Varen, Chancellor Rythar announced, his mandibles curling in disdain. Since your species insists it has a talent with predators, you are welcome to demonstrate. Know this, the chamber is sealed. None will save you if it decides you are meat. I'm aware, Elias said, his voice carrying easily, unforced. He didn't glance at the Chancellor. His gaze stayed fixed on the beast in the cage, not in fear, not in challenge, but with the focus of someone who had made his choice long before stepping forward. Gasps stirred as the gravity barrier parted for him, bending like water to allow entry. Beyond it, the air felt thicker, heavy with the predator's presence. He walked until he was 10 paces away, then stopped. The predator was enormous, scales like obsidian plates overlapping in patterns that caught the dim light, limbs tipped with claws that could shear warships. Its maw could swallow a shuttle whole. Yet it didn't move. It only stared. Elias didn't speak at first. He let the silence stretch. Let the beast watch him as he watched it. His heart beat steady. He remembered suddenly being a boy standing in front of a stray dog, teeth bared, fur matted, starving. He had extended a hand then, not because he was fearless but because he had understood. Hunger and pain were not malice. That dog had become his companion for years. Now, in a chamber full of watching eyes, he called on the same quiet certainty. Finally, Elias said one word. Sit. The word carried no roar, no thunder. It was calm, measured, firm. The chamber held its breath. The predator's head tilted, nostrils flaring. Muscles shifted under its plated hide. For a moment, it seemed ready to lunge. Counselors leaned forward, some eager to see blood, others horrified at the audacity. And then, with a low rumble like shifting stone, the predator lowered its bulk. Slowly, deliberately, it sank until its chest touched the crystalline floor, limbs folding beneath it. Its head lowered, massive jaws parting in a slow exhale. It had obeyed. Chaos erupted. Voices shouted, bodies surged against restraints of order. Some screamed it was trickery, others cried prophecy, still more demanded answers. The Chancellor's mandibles clicked furiously, his composure shattered. Elias didn't move. He held the predator's gaze as if nothing else in the galaxy existed. The predator's eyes, pools of darkness, softened with something strange, recognition, perhaps, or respect. He stepped closer until he could feel the heat radiating off its scales. The predator did not strike. It did not growl. It watched, and when he raised a hand, its massive head tilted further down, as if acknowledging a truth no council command could force from it. From the tiers above, one voice broke through the storm, impossible. But Elias knew. The predator hadn't yielded to force or fear or threats. It had obeyed because something in it recognized the one thing the council could never understand. Humanity did not dominate predators. Humanity lived with them, trusted them, tamed them not by chains but by bonds. The chamber's uproar continued, but Elias heard none of it. He only saw the predator, vast and terrible, and knew that in this instant, everything had changed. For the first time in its long violent existence, Extinction Incarnate had listened. Not to the council. Not to ancient empires. To a human. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The uproar in the council chamber lingered long after the predator lowered itself. Delegates argued, shouted, demanded explanations, but none of it reached Elias Varon as he stood in the gravity pit. His breath came even, steady, his eyes fixed on the enormous form lying obedient before him. The beast that had silenced fleets with a single strike now waited, its chest rising and falling with slow rhythm, its black gaze locked onto him with unnerving intensity. He had expected danger, perhaps even death. What he had not expected was recognition. Something ancient and wordless passed between them, and in that exchange he sensed no malice. The predator had chosen stillness, chosen him, and for reasons the council could not grasp, that meant survival for both of them. Captain Varon. Chancellor Rythar's voice cracked across the chamber like a whip. The Valith leader's mandibles clicked with fury as he rose from his dais. This is blasphemy. Trickery. Some form of deception. No creature of such devastation could yield by a human's command. Elias did not turn his head. You've all been shouting at it for hours. Maybe try speaking to it. The chamber erupted again. Insults hurled, accusations of sorcery, charges of conspiracy. Elias tuned them out. His attention remained where it needed to be, on the predator, watching for the faintest twitch of hostility. Instead he saw its muscles relax further, its claws curl against the crystalline floor not in readiness, but in something resembling patience. The silence that grew between them was heavy but not hostile. Elias felt as though he were standing at the edge of an ocean, waves held back by will alone, a tide that could consume him yet refrained. For the first time he wondered what it meant for such a creature to listen. On the higher tiers, Counselor Serac of the Athani leaned forward, eyes gleaming like shards of ice. We all saw it. No illusion could be sustained under the gravity field. The predator responded. Not to us but to him. His gaze sharpened, locking onto Elias. What are you, human? What did you do? I told it to sit, Elias said simply. Laughter broke out among some, brittle and desperate, while others recoiled at the audacity. The predator's rumble silenced them all. A low growl reverberated through the chamber, not threatening but a reminder of its presence, its awareness. It shifted slightly, head lowering, not toward the council but closer to Elias. The movement alone sent dozens of delegates stumbling back in fear. A realization settled like frost. The predator had ignored the voices of 200 worlds. But it responded to one. Inside the cage of its mind, Karuel stirred. The creature that the galaxy called Extinction Incarnate did not think as lesser beings thought. Its language was scent and instinct, memory carried in bone and scar. Yet there was clarity in its focus. This one was different. This small, fragile creature with steady eyes did not radiate the brittle arrogance of the others. He had not screamed, not postured, not threatened. He had spoken a command, simple and unyielding, as though he expected obedience. As though obedience had meaning. Karuel's world had been centuries of slaughter, endless skies filled with fire. It had learned that the voices of the elder races rang hollow. They tried to bind it with chains of pride and fear, neither of which had weight. But this human, spoke as though he already understood. That understanding felt like a tether, not of force but of recognition. The growl faded and Caruel lowered its head fully to the ground. Submission but not defeat. A choice. Gasps filled the chamber. Elias exhaled slowly, aware of the ripple it caused. He could feel eyes boring into his back, feel the tremor of fear rising into anger. Already the counselors whispered conspiracy. If the predator bent to humanity, then humanity was suddenly dangerous in a way no fleet could match. Enough, Chancellor Rythar snapped, mandibles clattering. This is unacceptable. Withdraw the human. Reinforce containment. We must resume negotiations with the creature on proper terms. The predator did not move at his words. It did not lift its head, did not so much as flicker an ear. Instead it remained fixed on Elias, waiting as if all other sound was meaningless. Elias let the silence draw long enough for the truth to sink in. Then he spoke again evenly, carefully. Stay. Caruel remained as it was, the great limbs tucked, eyes calm. No twitch of resistance, no restless shift. It had heard and it had obeyed. The chamber quaked with voices. Counselors shouted over one another, panic spilling into rage. Some accused humanity of conjuring forbidden sciences, others called for immediate sanctions. A few, quieter but no less certain, whispered of prophecy, of ancient cycles in which the youngest species would guide the oldest beasts. Elias stood unmoving in the storm. He could feel sweat cooling on his neck but kept his hands steady at his sides. He knew the council wanted him removed, dissected, humiliated. He knew too that if he left, they would attempt to break what had been forged in this moment. And he also knew the predator would not allow it. The council's debate grew so furious that the sound blurred into a single roar. Elias focused instead on the creature's breathing, slow and even. He thought of earth, of wolves drawn to human firelight, of horses first bridled, of falcons on leather gloves. It was not domination. It was not force. It was something older, written into both predator and human, the possibility of bond. When he finally turned his gaze back to the tiers of alien faces, his voice cut cleanly through the noise. You've tried for decades to command it. You've failed. Maybe stop asking why it listens to me and start asking what you've done wrong. The words landed like stones in a pool. Silence spread in ripples. For once no one found a ready reply. Above, Serac of the Athani leaned back slowly, his pale lips curling into something unreadable. Perhaps, Captain Varen, he said, voice carrying to every corner, we should indeed be asking different questions. Elias felt the weight of the predator's gaze still on him, steady as a mountain, waiting. In that waiting, he understood something the council did not yet see. This was not victory. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Because if the predator would not heed the council but would obey him, then the fragile balance of power across the galaxy had already begun to crack. And somewhere beneath the council's anger and denial, fear was spreading like wildfire. The predator breathed, low and steady, as though it had already chosen its place. Elias wondered for the first time if he had truly chosen his. And high above, in whispered shadows, the counselors began plotting what must come next. The council chamber no longer felt like a place of law but a pit of accusation and fear. The tiers of representatives, once a measured circle of order, had dissolved into factions shouting across the crystalline balconies. Some demanded Elias be removed at once, others argued that humanity should be interrogated for whatever secret had allowed this miracle, and a few sat in stricken silence, watching the predator resting obediently with its head low to the floor. Elias Varen remained where he was, boots planted firm, eyes locked with the vast black gaze of the creature beside him. The council's chaos did not matter. What mattered was the way the beast breathed, the way its immense chest rose and fell with a rhythm that was no longer tense but steady. It listened only to him. Do you not see? A delegate shrieked from the upper tiers, voice trembling. This is collusion. The humans have somehow enthralled the monster. They seek to use it to dominate the galaxy. Ridiculous, another spat, claws tapping the railing. No one controls extinction incarnate. Not even us. Chancellor Rythar cut through the tumult, his mandibles slamming together in sharp finality. The human must surrender control. The creature belongs to the council. We cannot allow a single young race to hold dominion over such a threat. At those words the predator stirred. Its head lifted slightly, a rumble building in its throat. Every delegate froze, their arguments silenced in an instant. The growl was not for Elias. It was for them. Elias did not smile, but his eyes hardened. He stepped forward by a single pace and spoke clearly. Down. The predator obeyed, lowering its head again to the floor. The simplicity of the exchange was devastating. In that one act, the council was shown the truth. Their commands were nothing, while a single human word carried weight. The silence that followed felt heavier than any uproar. Rythar's mandibles clicked furiously, but even he did not dare speak immediately. The predator's massive form loomed as a reminder of the consequence of arrogance. One of the elder races, the Vailitha's rival species, hissed from its balcony. This bond is dangerous. If humanity alone can wield the predator, then they threaten every treaty, every balance we have forged. Remove the human. Place the beast under our authority. The irony was bitter and plain. Every faction wanted the predator leashed, yet none could leash it. Elias understood that if he faltered, if he showed weakness, they would tear him and his people apart to seize the power they feared. So he bent, picked up a discarded staff of crystalline alloy from the chamber floor, and weighed it in his hand. His voice was steady as he addressed the predator. Fetch. Gasps erupted as he hurled the rod across the pit. The crystalline clang rang out as it struck the far wall and clattered down. For a moment the chamber was paralyzed, the delegates staring in horrified disbelief that he would dare treat the galaxy's most feared terror like some domesticated animal. The predator moved. With a low rumble and a fluid surge of power, it rose, its claws scraping lightly against the crystalline floor. The council held its collective breath, certain this time the beast would rend flesh. Instead, it padded across the chamber, jaws closing delicately on the rod. It turned back, walked with slow assurance, and dropped the staff at Elias's feet. The silence that followed was worse than any outcry. Delegates stared, faces pale or twisted in outrage, others frozen with awe. Even the Chancellor's composure cracked. "You dare humiliate us?" he thundered. "This is no pet to be trifled with. This is a galactic scourge." Elias met his gaze coolly. "Then perhaps it's time you stopped treating it like one." The predator rumbled low, as though agreeing. Its body settled again beside him, massive and watchful, untroubled by the storm of politics above. Councillor Serac of the Athani leaned forward, his eyes sharp and cold. "The human demonstrates not control but something older. Bond. That should trouble all of you." His gaze swept across the chamber. "If it chooses humanity, then humanity alone holds a power we cannot rival. Ask yourselves, what happens when their species decides to wield it?" The word struck like a knife. The assembly erupted again, fear sharpening into fury. Some demanded humanity's exile, others whispered about war. Already lines were being drawn, coalitions forming in the shadows. Elias felt the shift like a tremor under his boots. He had not intended to spark such dread, but he would not apologize either. The predator obeyed him because he had treated it with respect, not arrogance. That was the truth none of them would accept. Karyul, in the quiet of its own mind, understood. The voices of the council were empty clatter. The human's voice carried weight because it was not wrapped in lies. For the first time in an age it felt something unfamiliar. Calm. Rythar slammed a claw against the railing. "This cannot stand. If the human does not yield, then the council will act. The Vailith will not permit this dangerous imbalance." Elias knew what that meant. Hunters would come. Armies, fleets, assassins. They would not permit him to walk free with the predator at his side. The council's pride would demand blood. Still he did not flinch. "Then you'll find," he said quietly, "that the predator listens only to me, and it does not like being threatened." The predator's growl rose at his words, a deep resonance that rattled the very air. The council shrank back as one, the illusion of their power shattering under the sound. Elias let the moment hang, his voice steady as stone. "You've tried everything. Chains, weapons, threats. None of it worked. Stop treating it like a monster and you might survive what's coming." For a heartbeat there was only silence. Then whispers rose again, dark and urgent, and Elias knew he had not calmed them but set the stage for something far more dangerous. The predator's obedience had saved him here, but it had also painted a target on his back larger than any he had borne before. The chamber adjourned in chaos, no resolution reached, only more divisions drawn. Delegates scattered with hurried escorts, their private channels already buzzing with plots. Elias remained in the pit, hand resting lightly against the predator's scaled flank. He could feel the pulse of life beneath, steady and immense. The creature that had ignored the council, defied fleets, and shattered empires now lowered its head at his word. And the galaxy, he realized grimly, would not forgive him for it. High above, in hidden corridors, the first whispers of assassination orders were already taking form. The attempt came at night, if night could be said to exist aboard the Council's orbital citadel. The station's artificial cycle dimmed the lights to mimic darkness, corridors hushed, the air heavy with the illusion of calm. Elias Varon sat cross-legged on the polished floor of his assigned quarters, the walls humming faintly with energy fields. Across from him, filling most of the chamber, lay the Predator. Caruel rested on its side, vast chest rising and falling with the cadence of something ancient at ease. It should not have looked peaceful, not with claws that could shear steel and jaws wide enough to crush an armored cruiser, but there was a strange serenity in the way it watched him. Elias had not slept. He knew too well that the Council's chaos would not resolve into diplomacy. Fear bred action, and action meant blood. Humanity had been thrust into a spotlight they had never sought, and now he was the hinge on which the galaxy turned. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the Predator's slow breath, and allowed himself the thought that he was not alone. The first strike came without warning. The chamber wall shivered as its outer layer dissolved under molecular charges. Figures spilled through the breach, tall, armored, faceless in their helmets. Hunters from the Valith, their energy pikes flaring with cold fire. Elias was on his feet in an instant, heart hammering, yet his voice was steady. Guard. Caruel rose like an earthquake given flesh. The attackers hesitated for a single heartbeat, weapons lowering as they comprehended the scale of what they faced. That heartbeat was their undoing. The Predator surged forward, jaws snapping, one massive claw sweeping through the air with terrible speed. Armor cracked, bodies slammed into walls, weapons fell clattering to the floor. Elias pressed himself against the chamber's edge, forcing himself not to flinch as chaos erupted. He had seen combat but nothing like this, violence delivered with such inevitability it felt less like a battle and more like a verdict. Caruel moved with terrifying precision, its obedience to his command absolute. It struck down attackers but never toward him. One hunter managed to raise a rifle, its barrel glowing as it charged. Elias saw it too late, until Caruel's tail lashed, the weapon torn from the assailant's grasp before the shot could fire. The hunter slammed against the wall and crumpled. The Predator growled low, then turned its head toward him, awaiting further direction. Hold, Elias said, his throat dry. Instantly the beast froze. Its claws, still poised above a trembling survivor, hovered in restraint. The hunter gasped, eyes wide, disbelief warring with terror. Slowly, Caruel withdrew, returning to Elias's side with a deliberate grace that chilled the air. The survivors fled, scrambling through the breach, their retreat leaving silence heavy in their wake. Elias stood still, adrenaline shaking in his veins. He forced himself to breathe evenly, knowing Caruel mirrored his calm. The Predator's massive head lowered until its eye aligned with his, dark and fathomless. Good, Elias whispered, barely aware he'd spoken aloud. Very good. In the aftermath, alarms screamed through the station. Security forces poured in minutes too late, their weapons raised, faces pale at the carnage. They found Elias standing unharmed, the Predator looming at his side. Not a single strike had touched him. That truth spread faster than any report. Within hours, whispers turned to certainty. The Council had sent hunters and the hunters had failed. Images leaked of broken armor, of Caruel crouched protectively near the human envoy. Across the stars, broadcasts replayed the same question. How could the deadliest being in the galaxy choose a human over every ancient power? The next attempt came not in his quarters but in transit. They had ordered him escorted under heavy guard to another chamber for questioning. Elias walked at the center of a formation of armored soldiers, Caruel lumbering behind with unsettling silence. The corridors trembled with its steps, every other being scattering before its approach. Halfway to their destination, the ambush struck. Explosive charges tore open the corridor wall, depressurizing the passage in an instant. Vacuum roared, dragging bodies toward the void. Elias felt his lungs seize, his vision blur, until a shadow enveloped him. Caruel moved with impossible speed, curling its body to shield him. Its claws anchored into the flooring, its massive frame sealing the breach. Air stabilized. Soldiers who had survived the blast stared in shock as the Predator growled, the sound vibrating through the metal. Figures in stealth armor poured in through the smoke, their weapons primed. Elias staggered to his feet, oxygen flooding his chest again. His voice cut through the chaos. Strike. Caruel did. The corridor became a storm of flesh and steel. Hunters screamed as they were torn apart, weapons crushed before they could fire. Elias pressed against the Predator's flank, shielded by both scale and intent. He gave short commands, left. Guard. Break. And Caruel obeyed each without hesitation, weaving destruction into precision. When it was over, the corridor lay in ruin. The few survivors scrambled back into the smoke, leaving their dead behind. Caruel shook itself, blood and dust scattering, then crouched low to Elias as if to confirm his safety. Elias rested a hand against its scaled hide, breath ragged but steady. The guards who remained stared at him with expressions that wavered between awe and terror. Not one of them dared approach too closely. They had witnessed the truth firsthand. This was no weapon, no beast to be unleashed indiscriminately. This was a force that had chosen obedience, and chosen to whom? Word of the second attempt spread even faster than the first. Across the council's networks, leaked feeds showed Elias shielded by the predator's body, Caruel tearing assassins apart, the human's voice carrying calmly in the chaos. Panic shifted into something else now: calculation. If hunters could not succeed, if fleets would only provoke devastation, then the predator was beyond containment. Unless you were human. Back in his quarters, Elias stood at the viewport, watching the scattered lights of the station's hull. His reflection stared back, drawn and weary, while behind him Caruel settled with slow, deliberate care. He had begun to see patterns in its behavior, the way it always placed itself between him and open space, the way it shifted subtly whenever others drew too near. It was not obedience alone. It was protection. He spoke quietly, not sure whether he was addressing the creature or himself. I'm not going to turn you into a weapon. I don't care what they want. You're not their slave. You're not mine either. Caruel lowered its head, the faint rumble in its chest almost like agreement. For the first time, Elias dared to rest his palm against its scaled brow. The heat of living power radiated beneath, immense and steady. The predator closed its eyes briefly, an ancient titan acknowledging the bond with a fragile human. The galaxy would not understand. They would call it manipulation, witchcraft, threat. But Elias understood, and Caruel understood, and perhaps that was enough. The door hissed, drawing his attention. An officer entered hesitantly, armor gleaming, eyes fixed warily on the massive form sprawled across the floor. Captain Varen, she said carefully, the council has convened an emergency summit. They demand your presence. And it insists you bring the creature. Elias turned, studying her expression. Behind her words, he read what was unsaid. The council had failed to bend the predator. Now they would be forced to watch as it bent for him. He glanced at Caruel, who had already risen, muscles shifting under obsidian plates. Its gaze locked onto him, awaiting command. All right, Elias murmured, straightening. Let's not keep them waiting. The predator followed as he stepped into the corridor, its bulk filling the space, its presence silencing every guard who dared look upon it. Together, human and apex predator moved toward the chamber where the galaxy's fate waited, each step a drumbeat of inevitability. And somewhere deep within, Elias knew the council's fury had not waned. It had only sharpened. If they could not kill him in the shadows, they would strike in the open. The next battle would not be assassins in the dark, but the full weight of politics turned into war. The chamber of the High Council shuddered with the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. Elders of species that had outlived suns sat paralyzed, their jeweled robes trembling against frail shoulders, eyes fixed on the monstrous form crouched at the center of the floor. The apex predator, called Oblivion by countless worlds, did not growl, did not strike. Its black scales shimmered faintly under the vaulted lights as if each ridge was a mirror reflecting nightmare histories. Galaxies had screamed under its shadow. Yet now, it sat utterly still, amber eyes turned not to the council but to the human standing beside it. Adrian's pulse thundered in his ears, though his expression betrayed none of the storm raging inside. His hand hovered just above the creature's crown, not yet touching, but close enough that its monstrous head tilted ever so slightly toward him in anticipation. The council could not comprehend it, the beast that had shredded fleets, broken chains of empires, and ignored the united weapons of civilizations now poised, obedient, awaiting one man's command. Counselor Vale of the Lemurians rose, her translucent body trembling. This cannot be. No force in recorded history has bent that one to will. And yet, it kneels to him. Her voice cracked, brittle glass under the weight of disbelief. Adrian met her gaze. His voice, calm but resonant, carried through the chamber. Maybe that's the problem. You tried to chain it with fear, with weapons, with threats of annihilation. You never once tried to understand. He turned slightly, meeting the burning eyes of the predator beside him. I didn't tame it. I treated it as something more than what you called it, more than extinction. And it chose. The Predator shifted, its body coiling with a restrained power that made entire rows of guards clutch at their rifles, knuckles white. But Adrian lifted his hand, fingers brushing against the ridge of its skull. At the touch, the beast let out a sound that froze the room, something between a purr and a low rumble that shook the air like thunder in deep caverns. For the first time in its history, the Predator radiated not menace but allegiance. A ripple passed through the chamber, disbelief battling awe. Elder Kator, who had spent a millennium studying predators across galaxies, whispered hoarsely, "It obeys him. Not out of compulsion. Out of choice." The council erupted, voices colliding in chaotic uproar. Demands, accusations, frantic theories. Some called for Adrian's immediate execution, declaring him a threat greater than the beast. Others, desperate and shaken, urged the council to learn, to seize this unprecedented connection. Adrian stood unmoving amid the storm, the Predator's looming shadow wrapping him like a mantle. Then a voice cut through the din, low but razor-sharp. "This changes everything." It belonged to Counselor Thrax of the KRLL Dominion, his insectoid mandibles clicking with dangerous calculation. His compound eyes fixed on Adrian like a predator measuring prey. If the apex can be swayed, if it can be guided, then whoever holds its loyalty holds the galaxy. Adrian's jaw tightened. He had known this moment would come. He had watched enough governments and empires twist symbols into weapons. They wouldn't see the bond for what it was. They would see only a tool. He stroked the Predator's head, feeling the heat of its power beneath his palm. "It won't be your weapon," he said firmly. "It won't fight your wars. Not anymore." Thrax's mandibles spread in a mockery of a smile. "And what if the council demands it? What if we decide neither you nor it should be free?" The silence that followed was broken by the Predator's growl, low and rolling like tectonic plates grinding. The chamber's lights flickered. Several guards collapsed to one knee, unable to withstand the weight of its presence. Yet still it did not move, not until Adrian laid his hand flat against its crown. At once, the growl subsided into quiet, the chamber trembling not with rage but restraint. The message was unmistakable. The Predator moved only when Adrian allowed. Counselor Vale rose again, her eyes shining with realization. "Do you not see? For the first time in millennia we are not in control. The galaxy has a new axis. It does not revolve around us anymore. It revolves around them." She gestured, hands shaking, toward the human and the beast. Thrax hissed, his ambition curdling into fury. "Then we cannot permit it to stand." His arm raised, signaling the guards. Weapons powered to lethal readiness. For a heartbeat, the chamber was a tinderbox, one spark away from an inferno. Adrian closed his eyes. Every fiber of him screamed to run, to fight, to do anything but stand still under 1,000 weapons trained on him. Yet he knew. Panic would unleash the Predator in the worst way. And if that happened, billions more could burn. He whispered, low but steady. "Stay with me." The Predator did not lunge, did not roar. Instead, its colossal body shifted closer, curling protectively around him, like a mountain come alive to shield a single soul. Its golden eyes flared with a terrifying intelligence, and the guards who had prepared to fire faltered, their courage dissolving under that gaze. Not because they feared death, they had trained for that. But because in that moment they realized the truth. It wasn't their weapons or fleets or walls that decided survival. It was Adrian's voice. And then Adrian spoke again, louder this time, cutting across the tension. "If you try to kill us, it won't just fight back. It will end you. But if you choose differently, if you let go of this obsession with control, you might find something stronger than fear. You might find loyalty, trust, respect. Things you've forgotten." His words hung in the air, daring them to believe. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Elder Kator closed his eyes, ancient wisdom weighing heavily. "We spent eons terrified of what would happen if the apex chose to listen to no one. We never asked what might happen if it chose to listen to someone who saw it as more than destruction." He opened his eyes, meeting Adrian's. "Perhaps the galaxy's survival does not depend on our command, but on yours." For the first time since the Council's inception, the balance of power shifted with a single nod. Vale added her voice, soft yet unyielding. "We cannot destroy this. Not without destroying ourselves. Let it be. Let him be." Thrax's hiss rattled the chamber, but even he could feel the tide turning. Reluctantly, the signal for weapons lowered. The guards, trembling, obeyed. Adrian exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders releasing like a taut bow unstrung. He pressed his forehead against the Predator's scaled hide, whispering gratitude too soft for the council to hear. The creature responded with a quiet rumble that resonated through his bones, a sound not of hunger or violence but of bond, of trust. The chamber, once a place of domination, now seemed smaller, insignificant compared to the bond standing at its center. Elder races who had thought themselves eternal rulers of fate sat in humbled silence. The galaxy had changed. Its predator no longer roared for blood. It listened to a human. Adrian lifted his head, eyes scanning the chamber one last time. This isn't about me. It's about proving something you've all forgotten. That the strongest power isn't domination. It's choice. He gestured lightly to the predator. And it has already chosen. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. In that quiet, something greater than fear was born. A new story carried in whispers that would spread to every corner of the stars. Not of extinction, but of the day the galaxy's deadliest predator bowed to a human. And for the first time, Adrian felt the truth settle deep in his chest. The future was uncertain, dangerous, and immense. But he wasn't facing it alone. The predator's eyes glowed, its vast form leaning closer as though answering a vow only it and Adrian could hear. Whatever came next, it would obey no council, no empire, no throne. Only him. The galaxy would never be the same.